Right, we're giving them a call this morning.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to The Heartbeat.
Bonjour,
I'm Christine Saunders. Dave, what was that music? Is that my new intro?
Which one? What's that?
The cartoon. I love it.
Yeah, well, the thing is, it was a choice between that or a trumpet fanfare. And trying to get these guys to stand in the car park outside and play outside your window first thing in the morning. Your neighbours won't be happy, will they?
Yeah, I would not be in the neighborhood any longer if that were to happen at 4 a.m.
Very much
yes.
so. So the brass band's out the window, so I thought, right, we'll try that one instead.
Oh my gosh! Well, thank you. Thank you for steering the ship again today, Dave. I'm excited. I'm actually a little nervous because I have two of the finest gentlemen that I believe are around, and so I'm going to just kind of launch. Good morning, everyone. Patrick and Jason. Jason is back with me. Jason Wood has been here with me a couple of times. Good morning, Jason. How are you?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for coming and co-hosting with me with my friend Patrick, and we're going to get into letting him introduce himself. And then, of course, Dave, you can say hi, too. I'm not going to, leave you out of this. But, again, thank you for coming and co-hosting with me. It's going to be an exciting hour. Patrick, welcome to The Heartbeat. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm fantastic. So Patrick and I get to work together pretty much on a weekly basis. We get to talk to each other, and we teach a class on site-based safety in our workplace. And Patrick also is the author of the book Left of Bang, which is how the Marine Corps Combat Hunter program can save your life. And I'm excited to dive into this. So how are you today, Patrick? Would you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My background is in the military. After college, I spent 7 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer. And then after my time in the service was done, I started a company called the CP Journal to provide behavioral analysis and threat recognition training to a broader audience to help people stay safe.
Awesome. And Jason also is an ex-military, so I'm sure that you guys have a lot to talk about today. So I'm really excited about the energy and the dynamic. And Dave, thank you again for steering our ship. It wouldn't be the same without you. We really appreciate you.
Well, it's like being on the Titanic, isn't it? You don't know when you're going to hit an iceberg with me. So don't worry.
Right,
I'll keep you on edge.
Well, we have people that are looking out for us, but we can't see you, so that's the problem.
That's the idea. I don't want any bugger seeing in me. I look like I've been stood on my head for the last 3 weeks.
Oh, my God. Oh, my gosh. So, Patrick, you are originally from New York, correct?
Yes. I grew up in Syracuse, New York, a few hours north of New York City.
Awesome.
And then after the military, spent a few years just north of Manhattan.
Oh, yes, the city. We've talked about the city before. That's awesome. So we have a jam-packed show. Like I said, Patrick and I get to work together. I have the privilege of working together with him in emergency management and prevention with teaching classes. And I'm excited to hear sort of about the book that you wrote and about your journey of getting there and life in the military. And I know that Jason has some questions that he and I have actually been, chatting a little bit about this show. And he actually put out on his Instagram page a space for people to ask questions of you, which is very cool. And I think it's still up there, right, Jason?
Yep, it still is.
Awesome. So if you guys have questions of Patrick throughout this hour, please go to Jason's Instagram page, which is J Floyd Wood, at J Floyd Wood. And there's a question in his story that's asking you to ask questions of Patrick. And we'll be sure and get some of those questions answered if we have time today. So, I just kind of want to launch into a little bit. We have about an hour still left, a little less than an hour. And I want to just kind of go into this whole how the Marine Corps Combat Hunger Program can save your life. What does that mean, Patrick?
Well, it was a concept that the military had first created around 2007. When we had first went into Iraq, a lot of the threats and dangers we were facing were things that we hadn't really prepared for and couldn't really predict. We were looking for people who were essentially hunting us, who were hiding amongst the population, who were, by wearing normal civilian clothes, they could avoid detection from a lot of our military equipment and technology. And it had caused Marines and soldiers to become very reactive. We would essentially be waiting to be attacked so that we could respond. And in 2007, Marine General James Mattis, who later went on to serve as our Secretary of Defense, looked at the situation and just said it was completely unacceptable, that we can't just keep telling Marines, hey, go get shot at, but once you do, you're going to make us proud. We have to give them the ability to recognize and identify these attackers and these adversaries before they actually launch their assault. And the Combat Hunter program was created to do just that. It taught Marines, how do you read behavior so that you can identify that one or those two people in the crowd who actually want, who have that violent intent, who want to harm you, and separate those people from all the others who just want to go about their lives. And the book stemmed from that Combat Hunter course, and was something that my co-author, Jason Riley, and I decided that we needed to put out so that we could begin to hit more people than just the Marines who were heading overseas with a lot of the skills that, were proving to be very successful and very helpful to people who were facing danger on a regular basis.
Nice. Did you foresee this being more towards the military, or were you looking to sort of put it out to civilians as well? Because I think it's kind of gone that way.
It has, and it wasn't necessarily what we were initially looking at. For the Marines, at the time, we were training about 40 out of every deploying 1,000 Marines, and that was enough for a unit to, 40 out of 1,000 was enough for a unit to be, qualified and ready to go. And we were talking with Marines who were saying, this course was great. I did something on my last deployment. It saved my life. I thank you so much. But there was nothing for them to have after our course, nothing for them to review and continue to learn how they can become better at this. And so initially, our goal was just to get this material out that just at the time, because of a number of limitations, just couldn't be taught outside of the classroom, and to start to provide information to Marines and soldiers who were about to head overseas to help keep themselves safe and not restrict it based on who could come to a 2-week-long course. Right. After that, as you mentioned, a lot of started to gain some traction in the police and then schools, and a lot of people who were just looking to be more aware of their surroundings and were looking for a process and a method that they could use day to day to help themselves just feel more safe.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I know I've read most of it. I still am not done with it because, I'm a slow reader. But I know that Jason he listened to the audio book. And Jason, any initial thoughts before we go to our first break, and then we can dive in deeper?
Yeah, no, I think this is I got a chance to read the audio book while I was traveling just this past weekend. And I think this is a very relevant topic for a lot of, specifically veterans. I think I got a chance to deploy 3 times from 04 to 05 to 06 to 07 and then 08 to 09, so back to back to back. And over that time, you kind of saw a natural progression of things and the recognition, exactly what Patrick was talking about, the recognition of the threat. From 04 to 05, it was the very initial kind of surge into Iraq and for me, and the ability to recognize the threat was very limited because, as Patrick said, the enemy was all around you and blended in with the general population. And then by the time I think the deployment in 2008, 2009 happened, I think because of training like the Combat Hunter program, there was an ability to kind of recognize based on all the different things that Patrick and Jason lay out in the book, where and what that threat kind of would look like amongst the general population. So I think this is very relevant for when my time in the military, as well as when I've transitioned out into the civilian world and how I live my kind of day-to-day life. And, everything from, sitting facing the door in a restaurant to recognizing a possible situation that I may want to get myself out of.
That's fantastic. Awesome. I love the insight. And this is I kind of geek out on this topic a lot because, like I said, Patrick and I get to teach a class. We have maybe 3 hours to teach people what we can teach them. So it's a very limited space of time. And so, yeah, I'm excited. I could probably talk all morning long. So Dave, you'll have to reel me in, but let's take a quick break. And then we'll come back with these two fine gentlemen. We're going to go and listen to Dexy's Midnight Runners, Come On Eileen, and we'll be right back with Jason and Patrick. Welcome back to The Heartbeat, everyone. It's Christine Saunders with my special guest, Patrick Van Horne, and my special co-host, Jason Wood. And we are talking about Patrick's book, Left of Bang. And before we left, Jason brought up a great topic that I'd love to just sort of expand on a little bit. And that is seeing this book as a sort of just referencing from people who are in the service, in the military service, and they're transitioning out to civilian life. And, this is not always a fun topic, safety, security, situational awareness with everything that's going on in the world today. But I think that talking about it is the first thing that we can do. So, Patrick, I'd love your take on the last comment that Jason made about, that transition from military life to civilian life. And did you have that in mind when you started writing this book?
Not at all. But one of the other things that Jason said that just caught my attention was, he talked about he did his 3 deployments, and by the second and the third, he was kind of realizing how to do this. And that was kind of just common wisdom at the time of, hey, you do 2, 3, 4 deployments to Iraq or Afghanistan, and you're going to become really good at recognizing who is dangerous. And you say, well, that's great, but a lot of bad things can happen on my first or second deployment. And one of the things that the Combat Hunter course did, and the process that we talk about in Left of Bang for situational awareness, was designed to take, what Jason was doing intuitively by deployment number 3, and teach someone who had never been out of the country or never been in dangerous situations before a process to go through so that they could begin to take actual quantifiable steps to being able to identify those people with violent intent and ensure their own safety before they went overseas. And I think it's something that you've probably seen a lot of veterans today around the country, but it's also a process that, just everyday civilians can use to help ensure their own safety or just be more aware of what's happening around them.
Yeah. I was chatting a little bit with Jason yesterday, and there's a part in the book, and it's not in the first 10 pages, so you're going to be proud of me. It's about humans being predictable. And There's a reference to like the Rock-Paper-Scissor Game. Could you talk about that? I think that's like a really insightful way to sort of describe that to somebody who is not a military person.
Oh, man, you're talking about a section that my co-author, Jason Riley, wrote.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm only half kidding. But a lot of the premise to the book and our approach, we talk about getting left of bang, and what the phrase means is that, we're looking to see something that is about to happen so that we can protect ourselves. So if we're going to be proactive, we have to know what's about to occur. And when we start to think about, well, how do you predict what someone is going to do, we have to start to identify these predictable traits and things that a person could do that allow us to start to see what their intentions are, or more accurately realize that their intentions for being in this room are different than everyone else. And, if you go to a Starbucks for a cup of coffee, everyone in that store, generally speaking, is there to buy a drink or get some food or meet with a friend or do some work. Their purpose for being there relates generally to one of those things. And when you start to look at people who are in an area to, do something violent, their intent, their purpose for being there is completely different. And as a result, their behavior is going to be completely different. And so when we start to look at, a lot of the premise of the book was when we look at how does a person betray what their intentions are based on how they're acting, we realized we had to start to look at these predictable indicators to give us that time so that we could do something about those people that we recognize and identify as being a little bit different or having a different reason for being here.
Right. So, Jason, let me ask you this question, because you kind of talked about it earlier about, seeing where the exits are and going in a restaurant and sort of doing that scan. What are you looking for when you're doing that?
It's definitely just a sense of situational awareness. You're a little bit. I feel like when I came back from those deployments, especially like the couple years following those deployments, you're kind of at a heightened sense of awareness of what's around you. When you're on deployments, because I did several tours, and on most of those tours I did convoy escorts, kind of things like that, where you're on the roads of Iraq and you're traveling a lot from point to point all over the country. And during those deployments, you're driving for 6 hours, and on those 6 hours or 3 hours or however long you're on the road, you're paying attention to every detail. The trash that's on the side of the road, the dead dog that's on the side of the road, trying to look for anything that might signal that there's danger ahead. So when you come back home, everything from traveling under overpasses, because that was a high threat area when you were in Iraq, to a piece of trash that may have been on the side of the highway, you're paying attention to. And so I think that just carried over for me into everything. And I think that happens to a lot of vets that transition out into the civilian world, and military that are living amongst us today, is that heightened sense of awareness that, hey, if I go into a restaurant or a Starbucks and you're 9 times out of 10, you're doing kind of an initial scan, and they brought in, and Jason and Patrick brought up a lot of very relevant points in the book, where you're talking about kinesics and biometrics and geographics and atmospherics. You're looking at different things to collect as much information about the situation around you, just in case there were things that happened. So where are the exits? And this is very unpopular in today's world, but you are doing some level of profiling. You're looking at people to see if they could be a potential threat. You're looking at their body language. You're looking at what do they look uncomfortable, and all the different biological things that you're looking for amongst the people that may be at a restaurant. So there's a lot of conversation about the high stress environment. Is it PTSD? You talk about, like, in a more PC environment that we're living in today, are you profiling people? And there's a lot of unpopular parts about this, but I think there's a lot of relevant, keep people safe and out of danger topics that are surrounding this as well, that need to be talked about.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that. Patrick, do you feel like you had the same experience coming back from, or transitioning out of military into civilian?
Absolutely. A lot of, when you think about what you do day to day, a lot of it's based on what you perceive as being a risk. And so, when you look at some people that you might interact with who are not situationally aware, I'm willing to bet that many of those people haven't had or haven't seen a lot of things that could go wrong or things that could be violent. So they have no perception of an actual risk, and so it's really hard to convince those people that there are risks, there are dangers out there that they should prepare for them. It's no different in Chris, some of the work that we do now with wildfires and floods. For our community, people understand that yes, this is very real, and they take realistic precautions to keep themselves safe if it happens. But there's others that we interact with who go, oh, it won't happen to me. Nope, can't happen here. And even though you could see a lot of examples where it has, just until that person believes that, yes, this is an actual danger, they might not do anything to protect themselves from it. And so a lot of it's just that perception and realizing, yes, there is some bad things that can happen, and I should do something to keep myself safe from it.
Right. So I'm going to give you both a question before we go to our next break. Just think about, and that question is, if you have those people who say, it's not going to happen to me, it's not going to happen in my community, there's not going to ever be sort of a mass fatality, mass casualty event around me, how do you convince them to just at least start thinking about being prepared for that? And then what steps would they take? So think about that, and we're going to come back after we listen to Dan and Shay all by myself, and we'll be back with Patrick and Jason.
The best music on the best station.
Expat Radio.
Right, we're going back live to Christine.
Welcome back to The Heartbeat. I have my special guest, Patrick Van Horne, author of Left of Bang, and my special co-host, Jason Wood. And we are talking about situational awareness, safety in our community. And before we went to break, I asked a question about, how do you... So let me just back up a minute. So in our community, we fortunately, because of Patrick, also have a pretty amazing mass fatality plan, which is awesome. And that gives us, the first responders and the incident management crew, some guidance. What it doesn't give is sort of the community and the civilians. So my question was, there are those people out in the world who just don't have that awareness about things that are sort of realistic in the world, and they don't think things can happen to them. It's never going to happen to my community. And so how do you convince them to think about it, talk about it, plan for it? And it, like I said, it's not an awesome topic that people want to talk about. It's a necessary one. So, Patrick, I'd love your insight. And then please, Jason, chime in.
Yeah, that is certainly not a lighthearted topic. But yeah, for our county, it wasn't, we were looking at the risk of violence, the threat of violence. We know that there's some people who are going to put in the work to protect themselves. There's other situations that simply cannot be prevented. There might not be an opportunity to stop something, and some of the planning that we've done is based around kind of that piece of how are we ready to respond, and how are we ready to react, even though we would prefer not to react. What are we going to do, and how trained can we be so that we can provide our community with the level of service that they expect and deserve. And so, it's not just prevention, which is obviously better in these types of situations, but also making sure that we are able to really just support and serve the community regardless of what happens. And I think Jason kind of had a great point. We were talking about at the break, for his community on the other side of the country as well.
Yeah. So Jason, maybe talk a little bit about sort of what happened in your community recently, and we can just kind of branch off from there.
Yeah, so I live in the Virginia Beach area, so we just had the mass casualty incident that happened at the Virginia Beach courthouse a couple weeks ago, I guess. I'm trying to remember exactly how long ago, but there were definitely some signs, I guess, people noticed about the gentleman that did this. And I think what really happened was post incident, like to the right of the, if we go on the book here, to the right of the bang. I think what happened is there were some things left of the bang that could have been, telltale signs, or signs that this may be a person of interest, or something that maybe somebody that maybe could have done something like this. And then I think right of the bang, when after the incident actually happened, unfortunately, it caused the community, and it caused the surrounding communities specifically to kind of have to open their eyes and say, these are things that could happen. What do we need to do to prevent that? And I mean, I even saw it in my own workplace where we had an active shooter exercise and trainings that happened after the incident happened. So trying to get more proactive about it, but I think the book is very relevant. That I think we tend to be reactionary in nature, where once an incident actually happens, we immediately go to, well, how can we prevent it? And then it's forgotten about 2 or 3 or 4, however many months later, and then we go back to living our daily lives thinking, oh, it can't happen to me. Well, it has to be one of those things where we're kind of always thinking left of the bang, instead of thinking, more to the right of the bang, if we want to go on the book's terminology there. But the incident in Virginia Beach definitely has opened a lot of eyes, at least around here.
Yeah. Patrick, thoughts?
Yeah, and so it's, especially the violence and the shootings, it's a unique challenge because, the probability of any individual person being involved in one of these incidents is still very, 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 very low. And so how do you, when you look at how you teach someone, well, you need to be aware that this could happen, yet at the same time balance it against, being the boy who cried wolf and seeing it everywhere. And it's one of the things that goes into the book Left of Bang, where we look at behaviors. So as we look at kind of behavioral profiling and behavioral analysis to help identify people who stand out, there are things that you can do outside of just the context of recognizing threats. I personally use the process we talk about. I've used it many more times in meetings, identifying the person who's about to have a problem with whatever it is that we're discussing, than I have to recognize, someone who's going to be violent. And when you look at these statistically very low probability incidents, being able to be confident in your assessments requires that you have the ability, or very often requires that you have the ability to practice it and develop your skills in this outside of just violence prevention as well. And so it's not just because we're talking about the book, but there's a lot of application to those behavioral principles and those behavioral observations that extend well beyond just the realm of security and safety.
Right. Could you give a tiny little example, just like outside of like a threat base, maybe like you were just saying, like in a meeting, like what does someone look like? Like, what are you looking for? What can you see? Or is it just automatic now for you?
No, it's certainly not automatic, but in every individual person that you come across, their behavior can be categorized in one of four ways. Their behavior is going to show they're either dominant, submissive, uncomfortable, or comfortable. Every person at every moment in time is in one of these four groups: dominant, submissive, uncomfortable, uncomfortable. And it's based on the body's fight or flight response. But in talking about, kind of the meeting scenario, if you're looking for the person who might not say anything in the minute, they might not chime in with whatever it is that they're feeling, but they're the person who's going to come up to you as soon as the meeting is over and say, I disagree with this, or we're not going to do it. I'm probably looking for people who are a little bit uncomfortable in this setting and who, despite their discomfort, are not chiming in or not bringing up whatever it is that's making them feel uncomfortable. Yet at the same time, I'm pretty confident there's something there that they're just not sharing. Or the person who, as you're looking at these dominant indicators, a person who's using their body and their behavior to either take up more space and make themselves look larger or make territorial displays. You're going to start to see those cues and those indicators of a person becoming more dominant build up right before that confrontation, whether it's a physical altercation, violence, or just someone snapping in a meeting. Yeah.
We don't have violence at our meeting.
Yeah. But just saying, just coming out and strongly disagreeing with whatever is being talked about. And the same indicators, we look at the videos of the attackers and some of the courses that we teach, or in a meeting, the indicators are exactly the same. It's just a matter of training yourself to deliberately go out there and search for them and understand them and use them as part of your day-to-day life.
Yeah. Patrick, actually, I just lost my train of thought, so we'll skip this. So, Jason, have you used when you did the combat hunter program? Do you use any of those skills besides looking at the entrances? Do you look at body language and those sorts of things?
Yeah, I mean that's definitely something that I use on a daily basis. I mean, you find yourself doing it everywhere from like Patrick was alluding to, like a meeting. Who's going to be the person that when I bring up a certain point of topic, whatever it's going to be, who's going to be that person that is going to confront me about it? Who's going to be that person that looks kind of uncomfortable about the things I'm talking about or the decision I'm making? Those kind of things in a meeting. But it goes all the way to just going out and having fun with friends. The situational awareness when you're kind of in a bar. I mean, it's who's already the dominant figures in the room. And then once alcohol gets involved, that can take it to another level. Who looks uncomfortable in the room? All those different things are, signs that I look for. I mean, it's definitely something that ranges from everywhere in a boardroom to going out and having fun with friends. I mean, you use it on a daily basis, and I think people are aware of it. When you talk to just somebody who hasn't been through the combat hunter program or hasn't been in the military, people are aware of the people that are kind of establishing themselves as the dominant figure in the room, people that have that feel of uncomfortableness. People are aware of it, but I don't think there's like that heightened awareness of it, and kind of gearing your yourself and your actions towards, how those people are going to react.
Right. So quick question before we go to another break to think about. So in thinking about what we've talked about today and how amazing this program has been for you, through your, second deployment, Jason, and then for you, Patrick, and taking this, a little bit wider, are there things that you think are not as helpful in knowing what you know? And like, do they do the exact opposite for you, if that makes sense? So let's take another quick break and listen to Ordinary Love by U2, and we'll be right back with Patrick and Jason. Heartbeat, I'm Christine Saunders, and we are here with Patrick Van Horne, author of Left to Bang, and my special co-host, Jason Wood. And we are in our final few moments, but, I left with a question before break, and I kind of stumbled through it because I wasn't exactly sure how to ask this question, but it really comes down to something like this. If you have too much information or too much awareness, like I kind of said when we had our little break, like hanging out with Patrick, sometimes, it's like, oh, I'm like over aware. Like, could it be the opposite? Like, could you have too much awareness and it could make you a little bit paranoid?
It's absolutely, something to think about, but, in the approach that we teach, using the behavior, it's something that you can become more confident in. The challenge, at least for me, comes in where, we do a lot of, there's a lot of videos that we use when we teach and we train, and you can become very confident in your abilities. And at the same time, the more you practice it, you realize how broad and how challenging it still can be sometimes. And maybe it's just because of, being a new dad, but, there's always the times now I realize, we're talking about approach that of the things that we can control, but at the same time, there's always those things that you can't control. And so that probably makes me more nervous or than anything else of just those things that are just simply outside of your control that you really can't influence that could affect someone that you love.
Mm-hmm. Jason, thoughts?
Yeah, I think Patrick nailed it right there. Especially as a father myself, there's the controllable and then the uncontrollable that you want to control. So that definitely causes some anxiety, I should say. But yeah, I mean, in the military, we're, before a mission brief or anything like that, you're taught to think about every contingent thing that could happen to you out there, when you're on the road or you're going on patrol or anything like that. So it's one of those situations where you kind of come back from a deployment and you're almost anxious about everything because you're in a situation and you're the ultimate pessimist. You think about every single thing that could possibly go wrong to you in that situation, instead of thinking, and I think this is where you start delving into the topic of post-traumatic stress. You start talking about just, the person's ability to enjoy themselves at the beach by just being anxious at the beach, thinking about, all the different things that could go wrong at the beach. So, it's that kind of conversation. And I think what Patrick alluded to with the controllable versus the uncontrollable definitely plays a huge role in that as well.
Wow. Yeah. That's insightful, because I think, the more awareness we have, it, for me, I used to be super, paranoid to walk down a dark street, and I would cross the street if I saw somebody, even if I didn't think anything. So it's just like having that awareness has made me feel a little bit more confident, and, just realizing that I can't control everything because I am a control freak. And so I think that's super, super insightful. So before we, forget and maybe run out of time, Patrick, can you please share with folks how they can get a hold of you, what kind of services you can offer, and all that kind of good jazz?
Sure. So usually the main spot, or there's kind of two spots. The first is all of the stuff that, we've kind of talked about at a pretty high level here today, but all the behaviors that we're talking about you can find in our book, Left of Bang, through Amazon or any other bookseller. And then the other place where I usually am is through our website, which is cp-journal.com. and cp-journal.com. We put up a lot of videos and articles and things that relate to not just security or safety, but also other ways to use behavior to just help you, as we were just talking about, control those things you can and do it confidently, and at the same time sometimes accept when you aren't going to have the ability to recognize that attack or read that behavior. But those are usually the two spots where you'll find us.
Awesome. And what does CP stand for? I should have asked you that at the beginning.
So in the Marines, so we talk about it in Left to Bang, what the Marines called our approach is combat profiling. And this was one of coming out of the military and starting a business. It was one of the first lessons learned where in the military, if we called it behavior pattern recognition and analysis, no one would ever show up to the course. We call it combat profiling and the room would be full. But working with civilians, especially police departments, having the word profiling in your company name isn't very good in terms of branding or talking to the people that you want to be talking to. And so we had to, at some point, change the name from combatprofiling.com to the CP Journal. And so that's just kind of where it comes from, of realizing we'll never sell a course ever if we're have the word profiling.
That's awesome to take that realization and make some changes. That's awesome. So I've asked Jason this question, so I'm going to ask you, and we have probably about 3-ish minutes. So Patrick, how would you describe the difference between bravery and courage?
That's a great question. I'm not sure how I would describe the difference. I kind of, probably incorrectly, but I probably use them a bit synonymously. Just those times, whether you're being brave or you're having courage of, doing those things that are hard, that might frighten you or make you pretty uncomfortable, and going after it and continuing on despite that fear and despite that sense of discomfort. Even when it comes at a possible risk to yourself. But I'm not sure how I would define it being different.
Interesting. I love it. There's so many answers, Patrick. There's no right or wrong answer. I just am such a curious person when it comes to that because, it takes a lot of, bravery and courage. We use them together to do what you do every day. I've been up in front of people talking about very sensitive, heavy topics, and you do it in a way I'm just going to tell the story. We just did this mass fatality workshop, and I had the privilege of standing up in front of people with Patrick, sort of as his sidekick, and I was just kind of in awe about how you can bring this topic to an audience of people where they actually listen and hear what you have to say. So super awesome. And
thank you for that.
Yeah, it was a great, not that the topic was great, but the workshop was really great. So I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate you answering those questions. So, and Jason, any last questions for Patrick before we start wrapping up?
No questions. I mean, this is a really, I think, a book and a topic, a conversation that, I think is more relevant than ever at this point and in our communities. And I appreciate you guys taking the time to write that book and to have the organization you do and to try to better the communities around you and make them more situational aware. I think it's just extremely relevant. I think people shy away from the topic because of exactly what you laid out about profiling and all the different things that maybe are not as PC as people would like to talk about, but it's a conversation that needs to be had.
I appreciate you saying that. So I think we are pretty much at our time today. I can't thank you two enough for joining me and sharing space with me. This has been awesome. We could have went any direction with this topic, and I think it was awesome. We should come back and do it again. We can ask the listeners if they have anything to please email dave@expatradio.fr@gmail.com for any other topics that we might want to cover in this kind of realm, and we can certainly have Patrick back, and Jason, you can come back and we can have a great conversation. So thank you both today, and Dave, all is well. And thank you for steering our ship. And I think we are good today. And we have one last song. So Patrick and Jason, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Yes.
Thanks for being on today.
Yep. Thank you, Dave. We have Vincent by Don McLean to take us out today.
Perfect. And we'll speak to you next
Thank you.
week.
Sounds good. Be back.
Thanks for coming.
Bye.